Hey, welcome to Man Talk Episode 4, Season 3. We're continuing our mini-series on vision, and this is part 2. Hope you stick around for the rest of the episode.
Men, it's time to rise up. You're called to lead with courage, labor with purpose, and love sacrificially like Jesus. The world needs men of action, warriors who advance, not retreat. Now is the time to stand firm in faith. Be the man God has designed you to be, and make an impact for the kingdom. Are you ready to step up to the plate? Will you answer the call? This is Man Talk, the podcast promoting biblical masculinity.
Well, we are back talking about vision here in the studio, and it's so good to be with you again. As always, thank you to VCY, our production partner, and they helped us get in this beautiful studio that we're in, and we're so grateful for them. Well, we're talking about vision, and it's part 2. We're going to continue talking about the life of Joseph, but the big subject is vision, the need for vision. So do you have anything for us to open us up today? Maybe a quote or something to get us started in our conversation on vision.
I think it was Vance Havner who said, it's not enough to stare up the steps. You have to step up the stairs. In other words, the vision must be followed by the venture. So we don't only need to see it in our minds, we need to act on it in our lives.
And that's really, we did come up with that in the last episode where we were talking about how vision leads to action, and a vision without action is just a dream, right? And I think that's an old Japanese proverb. But today we do want to continue this reflection and discussion on vision, and specifically looking at the life of Joseph. But before we do that, I thought a good question for us to discuss would be this. What it was a moment maybe in your life or my life when we had a vision, but there was some type of resistance or tension that we had to push through, that we had to act through, keep on going through in order to see the vision play out.
Well, when we started out in evangelistic work, we traveled all over the country, and we saw families, and we saw children, and we saw public school, Christian school, homeschool, and we had a desire to produce a godly seed. We had a deep, deep burden that God would use us somehow to have a godly family. Well, having witnessed when people gave up on the public school, they went over to the Christian school, hoping that was going to remedy the situation. When that failed, then the great homeschool emphasis came about, thinking, boy, if we can just bring them home, then we're going to have a guaranteed result. And in many, many cases, none of these things worked out perfectly, and none of them was a guarantee, and it was discouraging as we were trying to formulate a plan. And I just told Debbie, I said, you know, if we want a different result, we're going to have to try a different method. So our hearts were turned to our children, but it was somewhat perplexing to witness the fall away of the second and third generation from the faith. So I would say that that vision prevailed. We kept on traveling, doing what we could do, and feeling our way through the darkness, as it were.
Yeah, and it really comes down to what you were explaining was you had a vision for a godly family, but different solutions that people looked to maybe weren't what they were hoping, and so you had to continue on in the midst of resistance. Yeah. I think in my life, I look back in college when I had a vision and this burning desire to serve the Lord, and the Lord had really put in my life that He wanted me and had gifted me to really find where I fit in His kingdom, but specifically to make my vocation about serving Him in His kingdom. And I really thought that vision involved foreign global missions. And I remember that's what I went after in college. I studied cross-cultural communications and things like that. I did an internship outside of the country for an entire summer, and I was convinced that this vision of serving God vocationally looked like missions, but God, in fact, did not have that as part of the vision, and there was some resistance to that when the plan that I had made started to fall apart. And I remember I had to push through that time. It was discouraging because I thought, man, I've spent my entire life training for this, and I spent all this money. I spent this summer doing this, and I was like, man, this is what I really believed in. And I put a lot of time and effort into this plan. But in reality, God was preparing me to pastor in a church for 6 years. He was preparing me to one day serve at the ministry now. And he was doing all that because the vision was serving him. The vision wasn't necessarily missions. And so I think sometimes too, we can get our vision confused with the specific plan that leads up to the vision. And I think sometimes we can view something as being a part of the vision. And when that falls apart, we need to understand what the overarching vision is. And so for you, the vision wasn't necessarily to find the right school. It was to raise us up to follow the Lord and love Jesus. And for me, it wasn't necessarily missions. It was serving God with my entire life and everything I had. And those are the visions. And so we must push through resistance. I think that's what we're getting down to here today is we got to push through resistance and keep on acting. That's what vision is. Vision doesn't just stop randomly. It keeps on acting and moving forward. And so we really want to continue on today. And last week we discussed a couple things about vision. We sought to answer this question right up front. What is vision? And we have 3 answers that we'll review real quick. First of all, vision is full of faith. It requires belief beyond what you can see. And vision also motivates. It propels us forward, and vision produces action. And so that was kind of our 3-part definition on what is vision, but we want to jump back now into studying the life of Joseph to seek to continue to answer what is vision in a deeper way.
Well, Joseph had a vision. Joseph had a calling from God, and Joseph had temptation. And you know what? You have a calling from God. You have a vision for life service, and you're also going to be faced with tremendous temptations. In fact, if you're not receiving any opposition, you're probably heading in the wrong direction, or you're just sitting still. So we shouldn't be surprised by adversity. We not should be surprised or upset with opposition from without, from within, wherever. I mean, that's par for the course. And certainly Joseph had his fair share of opposition and adversity.
And that really leads us into the review of last week. We talked about from Joseph's life, vision is God-given. And we spent pretty much our entire time talking about that vision is given from God, and true vision as Christian men comes from him. But today we want to build on that and talk about what you just brought up. Vision is given from God, but also we see in the life of Joseph, vision gets you through the fire. And so I think my question to you then is, as we start to discuss this and investigate this in Joseph's life, how did his vision get through his fire or his trials that he faced?
Well, what he saw in his heart when God gave him that dream of the sheaves and shocks of corn falling down before his. When God gave him that was a motivator. That inspired him. That kept him going. He knew he had a purpose. He knew he had a destiny. And you know what? He just pursued and plowed through the worst possible circumstances. I mean, think about it. His brothers thought evil about him. His brothers spoke evil about him. His brothers did evil to him. They sold him to a traveling band as a slave, for crying out loud. You're talking about a public relations problem when your own family hates you so much that they sell you out. They stripped him of his coat of many colors. They stripped him of his identity, and they sold him into slavery. So here Joseph has lost his family. He's lost his freedom. He's lost everything that's familiar to him. And boy, was he in a sad state of affairs. What was it, 13 years? 13 years, but his vision sustained him. It got him through those many, many fires. I guess we're going to talk about some of these fires that he had. And one of those fires was not only being sold and becoming enslaved, but when he finally got out of prison and was established in Potiphar's house, what happened? Potiphar's wife comes after him, and she comes to try to seduce him. And remember, there was nobody in the house but him and her, and it was a surprise. It was a secluded assault upon his purity, and he turned it down. It was a surprise assault. He didn't anticipate it. He didn't seek for it. There was nothing in him that contributed to this. This was totally an external attack. I'm telling you, it was a sustained attack. She came emotionally, and she came day by day. So it wasn't a one-time shot. This thing was ongoing. It was also a subtle temptation because it was delving into his emotions. She was flattering him. She was very manipulative. She had a Jezebel spirit on her. She was an immoral woman. And you know, her whole goal was to seduce him, but Joseph, he stood by the stuff. He said, how can I sin against God and do something like this? So here he is under the fire in so many ways, betrayed while he was in prison, neglected, sold out by his family. But yet it was this inward fire that kept him going. It was his vision of what God had called him to do that caused him to persist. And I want to say this, Stephen, you know, it's easy to fail, but you know what? You're not a failure until you quit trying to get up and go again. And it's so important not to let a setback become fatal. In other words, when there's been setbacks, and there will be, we've got to keep on going.
And really, both of those instances, I think, give us a really key understanding of vision, because the fire, so to speak, the illustration that he went through the fire, it was very different in each instance. The one instance was betrayal, and his family, the closest people to him, turning him over and really betraying him. And so there's hurt involved in that. There's pain involved in that. The other trial after jail, we didn't even talk about jail much, but he went through jail. And then this other fiery trial that we talked about, though, was when he was tempted to do wrong. And I think it's important to understand that vision works in both scenarios. It helps us get through the hard and painful times, but it also helps us get through the distracting temptation times that are full of temptation to do what we know we ought not to do. Why? Well, because vision is full of faith, and it helps us see past what is currently right in front of us. Why? Because vision motivates us through those hurtful times. It motivates us past that temptation, and it leads us to act correctly. That's how we define vision, and it shows up in Joseph's life as he sought to get over his hurts, but also get through those temptations unscathed. And so this goes back to vision. Vision is what helped him do this. And as he worked through adversity, he was able to really cling to his vision, but it also built character within him.
I have a quote here by Philip Brooks. I think this is fantastic. Listen to this. Sad will be the day for any man when he becomes satisfied with the life he is living and the thoughts he is thinking and the deeds he is doing, when there is not beating at the doors of his soul a desire to do something greater, which he knows he was meant to do because he is a child of God. Sad will be the day when there's no inward fire. Sad will be the day when there's no overwhelming, arching vision that drives us forward in life. Look, however old you are and however old you're going to live to be, we are here with a purpose, and I believe we're living in a time when the inward heart fires are burning low by and large. We're talking about passion. We're talking about vision. We're talking about calling. We're talking about a mission. We're talking about accomplishing the thing that God put us here to do. And I'll tell you what, we are here for a reason. We're here on purpose. We're here with a purpose from God. And I'll tell you what, when we have this in our mind's eye and this inward fire burning in our heart, I'll tell you what, we keep on keeping on.
And I loved what you just said there about how it keeps us going through those hard times. It really, I do agree with you. Vision does seem to be, the vision burning in heart seems to be kind of low at the moment. And I agree with you, because what helps you get through the turn down at work when you don't get the promotion? Well, having a vision for what you want to see in your life gets you through that time. What helps you get through when you're a pastor at a church through all the suffering and hurtful things that happen? Well, it's a vision for a better day. And it's not to say that our vision might work out in the exact spot that we are in at that moment. I think that's important to see from the life of Joseph. Joseph was in jail, but his vision didn't work.
13 years.
Yeah, but his vision didn't work out while he was in jail and he was enslaved. It worked out once he got out of those situations, but he had to get through those situations to get to where the vision wanted to take him.
Right.
And I think sometimes if we're not careful, we look exactly where we're at. I do this all the time. So I'm just confessing here and being honest for hundreds of people to see and everybody to hear on the internet. I do this all the time. I will get very focused on what is going on right around me in my specific situation without being able to look past it in vision. And I think that we have to do that because it could be that that current job is not where your vision will get fulfilled. It could be that your current ministry might not be where that vision gets fulfilled. It might not be in this specific home or this specific setting that my vision to see my family take that next step is where it's going to get fulfilled. But if that's my vision, there are things along the way. That goes back to what we were trying to say earlier when you gave that illustration of school and seeing all these things happen around you and families and then getting discouraged. It goes back to me saying like, man, I thought going cross-culturally was like the thing for me. It just because that thing is not the thing for you does not detract from the overarching vision. And so find a vision from God. Vision is God-given. We talked about that last episode. Vision is God-given, but man, if you have a God-given vision, that vision is going to get you through the fire, and it might not be at your exact spot, but it's going to propel you to move forward and to find where your vision is worked out. And so I think it's so important to remember that vision will sustain us in seasons of suffering and temptation.
Well, where you are may not be where you'll always be. So when Joseph was laid up in prison and he was trying to get out and people made him promises and they did nothing. This was an out-of-season, uncomfortable situation, but he never allowed a root of bitterness to spring up in his heart. Somebody said he went from the pit to the prison and ultimately to the palace because he didn't respond negatively to these terrible negative circumstances. So look, life consists of seasons, and the season you're in may not be the season where you're going to stay. And life is going somewhere. So we got to roll with the punches, go with the flow, understand adversity is par for the course. But when we have an inward calling upon our hearts, we know what we're here to do. We finally figure out what we're gifted at enough to strike out in a direction that will sustain us and keep us going.
And that leads right into the third observation in Joseph's life that we see, and that's that vision determines destiny. Vision determines destiny. It's God-given. It gets us through those fiery trials and temptations, but vision ultimately determines destiny. And ultimately, it's kind of what you were just talking about. You know, he kept his eye on the prize in those moments, and that vision that he had is what sustained him, but it also led him, I believe. It pulled him in the direction that he needed to go. You quoted from Phillips Brooks earlier, and Philip Brooks, and he said this, sad will be the day when a man becomes satisfied. And I think that it goes back to that idea of Joseph was not satisfied with being in jail. He wasn't satisfied with his position in Potiphar's house. He knew from that dream, from that vision, where God would have him to be, and it propelled him forward. And ultimately, it led him to the destiny that he was destined to have.
What you dream about today will determine where you are tomorrow. And this is the thing. When we have this something in our hearts that is unseen, unknown to others, but it's real and vital to us because we feel this call upon our souls, upon our lives, that's the thing that will determine our destiny. And we will become what we dream about. We will become what we think about. We will become what we act about. You know, you're not going to get in life what you want. You're going to get what you prepare for and what you plan for. And when you know what you're supposed to be doing, you formulate a plan. You come up with short-term goals and long-term goals to get to this destination. Now, let me just say this. Somebody may be thinking, well, I don't see everything so clear. You don't have to see everything so clear. And it doesn't have to be concrete. It can be an abstract ideal. It can be a burden. Maybe you have a burden for people. Maybe you have a burden for a unreached people group. And again, you're not seeing the whole thing all at once. It's not all in perfect focus, but there is something stirring in your heart, moving you in a direction. And when you move in that direction, when you act according to this vision and these dominating thoughts, that's when destiny becomes fulfilled as we move along the line, along the course of what we know and what is burning in our souls.
Yeah, really, it comes down to walking on the edge of your potential. It's finding that two-sided coin of ability, current ability, and future potential, and walking right down the middle of that line and pushing towards potential. Because, we all have abilities, and if we're not careful, we get stuck in what we're comfortable with. We get stuck in our abilities and who we are and what we're able to do, and we don't look past that to see our future potential. And vision always looks forward. And so if you want to be following the vision that God's given you, we got to be walking on that edge of potential in order to find and fulfill the destiny that God has for us. So we want to talk a little bit here. We want to take a break from Joseph's life, and we want to look at this. What are some vision killers? So we've seen what is vision. We've defined it practically. It's full of faith. It motivates and it leads us to action. It produces action. And then we have to look at it from Joseph's life. It's God-given, gets us through trials and temptations, and it determined his destiny, and it can determine your destiny. But what are some vision killers? What do we have to watch out for when we have a vision from God, and we know we do, but what is something that is going to be coming to try and steal that away from us?
Well, visionless people are vision killers. The people who are going nowhere want you to go along with them. And there comes a point where you simply have to avoid the critical, the cynical, and those who are constantly complaining. You cannot let the cold water committee and the wet blanket brigade drown out what your vision is, because some wise guy will come up and tell you, well, that's not theologically correct, or this is culturally unacceptable, or with your background. And they come up with all of these things. Stay away from these people. Get around somebody that's doing something. Get away from these analysts. I think we overanalyze everything, overthink everything, and here we are. We're crippled. We're handicapped. We're paralyzed by associating too much with visionless people. And God wants to do something. And don't get so big on thinking that everything is going to be automatic and God sovereignly overcome. Listen, David had to pick up the 5 smooth stones, and he had to sling the sling. God didn't do it for him. There's human responsibility in this thing. We know God's got to empower. We know God's got to enlighten. We know it's the goodness of God that leads to repent. We know all of this. But listen, there's got to be some initiative, and get around people who want to see something happen for the glory of God.
Yeah, what we're not saying is don't surround yourself with people. We're saying don't surround yourself with the wrong people. Find people that are pulling you forward, not taking you backward. And ultimately, we want people who are honest with us, but you can find people who are honest, who have vision and who propel you forward. And I believe that's so important. And it's super important too, when you're facing visionless people and you have people in your life like that vision is God-given, because you have to be able to go back to his word and remember that it is from him in those times. Another vision killer I think that we could see is tradition. Where we've been, who we've been, what we're used to. And we got to be bold enough to dream beyond our background, to get out of our comfortability and our abilities, like we just said a minute ago. Not all change is bad, and we got to realize that. We have to be willing to get past tradition.
Well, we're not in this thing for tradition's sake, and we're not in the kingdom for change's sake. We're into the kingdom for Jesus' sake. And sometimes there's some traditions that we cannot dare abandon, but there are others that we do need to let go if we're to move forward, else we become time warped. How many congregations are set up for a generation that no longer exists? And who do they attract? People over 70. And when they die, it's gone because they were unable to adapt and to meet people where they are in the current generation. Now look, wherever we got into the kingdom is what we like. That's our comfort comfort zone. That's the message, the style, the preaching, the music that we like. But the fact of the matter is, we're not bound. We don't want to be like Catholics, for crying out loud, and bound up by all of these traditions and these rituals and all of this kind of thing. We need to move and flex and understand that when tradition keeps us from going forward and fulfilling our calling, we might need to make some adjustments along the way.
I couldn't agree more with you. That is so true. And so we continue on, though, looking at vision killers here. And the next one that we see is adversity. You know, adversity can be a vision killer when we get focused on it, I believe. It's going to come. It's not if it's going to come. It's when adversity is going to strike in our life. And we can't let adversity stop us or distract us from the dream and vision that God has given us. You know, in Joseph's life, he faced suffering and he faced temptation and things that a lot of us, maybe some of you who are listening, have faced something similar, but I know I've never faced the level of temptation and trials that Joseph faced in his life. But that doesn't mean that I haven't been tempted to walk away from vision or the vision that God's given me for my life due to adversity. And I think all of us will face adversity. And the key is to be holding to that anchor of God-given vision during those times, because adversity will come and we can't let it kill our vision.
We cannot let negative experiences be the defining issue in our lives. We're going to have negative experiences. We're going to have opposition. We're going to have defeat. We're going to have adversity, but it cannot be allowed to become the defining feature in our life. It's got to be a stepping stone rather than a tombstone. And when these things come up and happen, amen, count it an all joy when you fall into all kinds of temptations, knowing the trying of your faith worketh patience. I mean, look how much in the New Testament is encouraging and exhorting us to keep on keeping on when the chips are down, when it's out of season.
And so we look at our last vision killer here, and it's pretty simple and it's pretty straightforward, but it's pretty obvious. Sin is a great vision killer. The temptation in Joseph's life could have easily taken him away from his vision if he had sinned against God. And in our lives, I think we get distracted by the instant and the imminent pleasure or temptation, and it distracts us from the destiny that God has for us. And so, men, do not allow sin to kill off your vision. Learn that in Jesus Christ, there is freedom from sin. You have the power through his blood to walk in freedom and to follow the destiny that he has for you. Do not allow sin to become a vision killer in your life. Protect yourself and protect that relationship that you have with the Lord. Jesus
is better than sin. All right, sin is appealing. There's pleasure in it for a season. You better believe it. There's things that cry out from within and from without that lure us into these things. But if we really believe that Jesus is better than sin, and he is, because there's no bad aftertaste with him. There's no aftermath. There's no guilt. There's no regret with him. There's no remorse with him. So I think to keep our hearts hot in the love of God, to pray in the Holy Spirit, and to get around people that are fired up for Jesus. I just love to get around people that's got a hot heart, that love the Lord. I just love to get around these kind of people. Why? It helps me to look past and to stop being preoccupied with sinful negativity and to move forward with these many, many exhortations in the New Testament that encourage us to keep on going on. Like rejoice in the Lord always, like pray in the Spirit, like giving thanks always in all things, like be filled with the Spirit. So these are positive commands that kind of guide the way here and keep us from falling into the ditch.
So, men, we have seen today that vision can get us through the fire. It gets us through trials and temptations. We've seen that vision will determine our destiny. And last week we saw from the life of Joseph that vision is God-given. And so I think I really have a question for you today, men. What is your vision? What's your vision in life? Do you have a vision? I know that that's something, as we've worked through these episodes, that I've even had to ask myself again in my life, and just to kind of revisit that in my life. What is my vision for what God has given to me? Do I have one? Remember, it's God-given, so we can always access it. So next episode, in this the last episode of this mini-series, we're going to look at how can you find your vision. And we're going to really dive into that and have some questions. It's going to be super practical. But between now and then, here's what you can do. go to God and begin praying him and asking him to help clarify his vision for you in your life. That's what you can do right now. And you'll be surprised at how he'll answer that prayer, because it's definitely within his will for you to know the vision that he has for you. And once you have that vision, cling to it in the fire. Once you have that vision, keep following after it and don't get stuck, or don't allow vision killers to detract you from that. Well, it's been a wonderful episode here today as we've gone through part 2 of We Need Vision, and we desperately need it in this day in our lives. Remember that if you are not following us on our socials, that's how you can stay up to date. You can know when episodes are dropping. You can know all about season breaks and everything. So go search @ManTalkPod or @ManTalkPodcast on your favorite social media platform and give us a follow. Also subscribe on YouTube @ManTalkPod. That's where you can find all of our content and a bunch of other stuff that you might not have even seen up to this point. And that would be a great thing for you to do so you can stay up to date with the show. Well, we'll be back here next time for the third part of We Need Vision as we close out this wonderful mini series. We'll see you then.